Welcome into Scoop and Score. My name's Tanner, and today we're going to be updating my Week 11 Top 25 power ratings. And again, this is a power rating and not a ranking, so it's not going to be like a playoff rating. It does not care about wins and losses. The only thing this is taking into consideration is it's a Vegas style power rating. So the only thing it's taking into consideration is who would win on a neutral field, or who would be favored on a neutral field tomorrow. It's a computer power rating. I have no control over it. So don't get mad at me when we get into the more controversial ones. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into it here. I'll break down a little bit more on why each team is where they are when I get more towards the top 10. Until I get to the top 10, I'm going to kind of fly through it. But anyway, let's get into it here. At number 25, I have Kansas State. They're down 9 spots from last week. At 24, I have Illinois down 3 spots from last week, coming off a bad loss to Michigan State. I'm kind of surprised they didn't fall out. It's kind of a good indication that Illinois is actually a pretty decent team, that the model didn't drop them out. Notre Dame at 23 jumped up 1 spot. I'm kind of surprised it didn't move them higher after that win over Clemson, but just average over the season, moved them up 1 spot. 22, we got Tulane up 1 spot. And at 21, we have Florida State jumping into the rankings for the first time. And I just want to add as a side note, I think Florida State probably should have been ranked last week, and I just missed them. So I don't think they jumped quite as high as they show jumping. I think I probably should have had them ranked last week and made a mistake. But anyway, they're up to 21. At 20, Cincinnati fell 1 spot. They're down to 20. At 19, we have North Carolina up 3 spots. At 18, we have Liberty up 4 spots. Big win for Liberty over Arkansas this weekend. That kind of solidifies them into the top 25 for probably the rest of the season, in my opinion. At 17, we have Wake Forest up 3 spots. At 16, we got Ole Miss. They're up 3 spots from last week. Ole Miss is one of those teams that I just can't make up my mind on if they're too high or too low in my model, so I'm just going to trust the model and go with them at 16. I'm not going to move any of the teams regardless, but just my personal opinions on them. So at 15, we have Washington. They're up 2 spots from last week. At 14, we have LSU only up 1 spot, which kind of surprised me after the big win over Bama. At 13, we have Penn State up 1 spot. At 12, we have Clemson down 6 spots from last week after a pretty embarrassing loss, 3-touchdown loss to Notre Dame, who the model did not think was... model had them ranked, but model did not think Notre Dame should have been in that game, or definitely didn't think it should have them winning by 3 touchdowns. It hurt Clemson's averages pretty bad. So at 11, we got Utah, and then moving into the top 10 here. At 10, we have USC. At 9, I know the most controversial team in my ranking is, well, one of the most controversial teams in my ranking is going to be Texas at number 9. They're up a spot due to Clemson falling. USC and Texas are both up a spot due to Clemson falling. And again, all it is who would be ranked on a neutral field or favored on a neutral field tomorrow. And the fact of the matter is that Texas would be ranked or favored on a neutral field over all the teams ranked below them. And according to Vegas, even some of the teams ranked above them. So we'll keep moving on here. At 8, we have UCLA. They're stayed equal from last week. At 7, equal from last week is Oregon. At 6, down 1 spot is Tennessee from last week. They were 5 last week. Up 4 spots. It kind of surprised me. It doesn't surprise me that TCU's up to 5, but it did surprise me that they jumped 4 spots. So TCU's up to 5. At 4, we have Alabama. 3, Michigan. No change there. And then we do have a change in the top spot. Georgia jumped Ohio State into the top spot. So we got Georgia at 1 and Ohio State at 2. So just to repeat, Georgia 1, Ohio State 2, Michigan 3, Alabama 4, TCU 5. Tennessee 6, Oregon 7, UCLA 8, Texas 9, and USC is your top 10 according to my model. So just a few notes that I have. So Texas and USC both moved up into the top 10 due to Clemson dropping out. TCU jumped all the way up to number 5, which I kind of noted is a little too high for my liking. And in my opinion, I think somewhere around 8 or 9 is probably more right. Vegas has them as a 7-point underdog to Texas this week, so that should tell you something. I don't necessarily know how I feel about that game. The model has TCU favored in that game, but I do think that's a little bit high for TCU, just personal opinion. Let's go ahead and talk about a little bit about the margins here. between the top teams. So Georgia is a 1-point favorite over Ohio State. They're a 1.5-point favorite over Michigan. They're a 2.5-point favorite over Alabama. And then the big break is between Alabama at 4 and TCU at 5. Alabama is another team worth noting. You can get mad about Alabama being at 4, but there's just another team that would be favored over every team ranked below them on a neutral field. If you're not a Michigan, Ohio State, or Georgia fan, let me ask you, do you really want to play Bama tomorrow? And I'm gonna assume the answer is probably still no. But anyway, the big break is between Bama at 4 and TCU at 5. Again, Georgia's a 2.5-point favorite over Bama, and they're a 9.5-point favorite over TCU. So there's about a 7-point gap between Alabama and TCU according to my model. So at 4 and 5, that's where the big gap is between teams. So to continue, Georgia is a 10-point favorite over Tennessee at 6. So only a half-point difference between TCU at 5 and Tennessee at 6. They're a 13.5-point favorite over USC at 10. So there's about a 3.5-point gap from 6 to 10. And then Georgia is an 18.5-point favorite over Kansas State at 25. So there's about an 18.5, 19-point gap between number 1 in my model and number 25. So I just think that's an interesting gap to keep note of. To compare that to the playoff rankings, which I think is kind of interesting to do. So I'll go ahead and compare the playoff rankings real quick. We got Georgia at 1 in the playoff rankings, Ohio State at 2, Michigan at 3. So the top 3 are exactly the same. TCU at 4. Obviously, in the playoff rankings, you have to respect TCU's wins and Alabama having 2 losses. Tennessee at 5. So the only difference really is Bama not being in there. Oregon at 6. LSU at 7. I think LSU is a little bit overrated in the playoff rankings, but again, they do have 2 really good wins, so you have to respect those. And one of the better wins in the country, so you have to respect the win over Bama. So at 8 in the playoff rankings is USC, 9 is Bama, and 10 is Clemson. So anyway, those are my updated power rankings for week 11 and a little bit of my thoughts on the playoff rankings and comparing the two. So if you enjoyed the video, if you could go ahead and give me a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, I'd greatly appreciate that. It helps me out a ton, especially as a new channel trying to grow and get an audience going. Go ahead and give me your thoughts on the rankings or ratings down in the comments. Who's too high, who's too low. I have my own personal opinions. I don't necessarily wholeheartedly agree with the model. But yeah, give me your thoughts down in the comments. Like and subscribe if you could. I greatly appreciate it. That's going to do it for me though. Peace.